Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken?
Hey, Kiernan.
You know, you start the recording and then you go, there you go. So then I got to put an editing note. Then Archie's got to edit it. How about you hear recording started, you just go, I'm Ryan Davis. That's gonna be the easiest way for the editing notes and for the editor himself.
Yeah, well, I you listen to it in 4 times speed, so I'm sure you'll get through it.
I don't edit it 4 times. And only one time did I do that and realize the time codes don't actually adjust. So it's just a nightmare of an episode. All right. Listen, I got to recenter. I came in hot. I apologize because today we're going to be going to a spiritual place, Ryan. So I want us to take a deep breath. And God, we're gonna really Catholic out today because I am feeling in a deep Catholic mood. You got Francis in the hospital, just hanging on by a thread.
Doing better. I read this morning.
It's up and down. He had 2 breathing crises. It's up and down. And
young
either
man,
way,
he's a young man. He's gonna pull through.
By Pope standards,
Yeah.
He doesn't look too good right now. But
I have a question for you. Do you think it's possible for Biden to be the next pope? He's a good age for it. He's Catholic.
Is it possible?
He's available.
Yes, any Catholic man can become pope. Is the answer? I learned this doing some research. But we've got Francis. Whether he
wait, are you and I possibly in the running?
We are both potentially in the running. I will say that from what I know of your lifestyle,
it fits in the Vatican.
There's certain aspects that fit in, but I believe they're the aspects that the church is trying to put away and into the past. So I think that I might be the future. Yeah. And
you would be an amazing pope, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much. I happen to agree. And I do think that there's another path to my life where I did become a man of the cloth. And I with the ambition I've got, I think that I probably would have been driving for that. The first American pope. Never had an American pope.
It is crazy that we have never had an American pope.
It's not that crazy. It's a slow moving machine, that Vatican. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the Vatican. We got Francis. We got the success of the movie Conclave, which you and I were both fans of. I also a big fan of the Jude Law vehicle, The Young Pope. And when you're in the pop culture version of the Vatican, it is an inspiration to go visit the Vatican itself. So while we were originally going to do a Rome episode, as I was diving in and preparing, I thought, you know what, we need to settle on just the Vatican for this episode.
Yeah, Rome is pretty broad, considering that you probably have. I mean, looking at this outline, you got a bit to say.
We got a lot to get through. We got a lot to get through, and I'm sure there's going to be asides because Ryan and I both grew up Catholic, so we like to riff on Catholic things. But so we will get into the meat of the episode.
Yeah, quickly, we're going to hear from so many of our Protestant listeners after this. They're going to be like, tune down the Catholicism.
Well, listen, I mean, okay, if you're listening to a Vatican episode, you're going to have to kind of expect it and give us a pass this one.
Well, the next episode, maybe we can do Martin Luther's door. Or whatever would be good.
Whatever big Protestant sites are out there. So let's. But before we jump in, though, we got to start with the Judy alert. This famously is for Ryan's mother, Judy. Ryan, he pops into America once or twice a year just to remind us that he still has the citizenship, but he's not good at keeping in touch with mother. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you for the Judy alert. Where are you? Are you somewhere safe?
I am in Krakow, Poland.
I've been to Krakow. I've been to Poland. Did you hit Warsaw en route?
I was in Warsaw over the weekend. Had a great time. We ate well, partied. It was a lot of fun.
And did you do the train to get to Krakow?
Yeah, got on the train. It was a nice 3-hour ride. It was.
Were you able to sit? I remember I wasn't able to sit. I had to stand the whole time.
Well, the most important thing that I've learned is it is so worth the extra $4 to reserve that seat.
That's just not, train. That's not my way. $4. I mean, that's,
You rather stand for 4 hours and spend $4.
I mean, that's $1 an hour. It's pretty much what I make now. Well, and I think this is teeing up. We're about to merge into a few episodes over the next couple months that are going to be very Europe focused, because I know you hit Brussels, where I have also visited. You hit Warsaw, you hit Krakow. So we've got a lot of good European destinations that I think
Amsterdam.
It's going to be a good tee up for the summer, because we're hitting Vatican. We'll do Rome, then we'll do some of these Polish sites. Have you gone to Auschwitz yet?
No, I go to Auschwitz on Saturday.
Upcoming, okay. Oof. Yeah. It's a tough way to spend a Saturday, but it's important.
Schindler's factory tomorrow. So I think our next episode will be
dark
Krakow. Yeah, I don't think.
I mean, Krakow though. There's good and there's bad, and there's Krakow is a very cool town to visit.
Well, I do think Auschwitz probably deserves its own episode.
Agreed. Yeah. And will you do Birkenau in the same trip?
They're close, right? Yes, I haven't bought my ticket for that one yet. It depends. I mean, it's
Auschwitz is the one where you really do a long tour. And now and where to next for you?
I will be spending all of March, or all the rest of March, in Spain.
Okay, all right. Where do you know where yet?
Half in Madrid and half in Barcelona, and then a weekend trip, TBD, in a small little town.
All right, this is very exciting. I've also been to Madrid and Barcelona, so we're going to have a lot of dual episodes, which is not super common for us.
Barcelona is one of the coolest places you can go. I'm super
very
excited.
Good though. It's got a lot of press around trying to drive the tourists away. This past summer.
Look a little Spanish, and my Spanish is so strong.
Oh, hold on.
They might think I'm just.
You're going to just say that. You're just going to say that and expect I'm not going to stop you there. Who the heck ever told you that you look a little Spanish?
Let me tell you, the wildest thing is that I don't even need to open my mouth in Europe before people speak English to me. Like I don't give off Polish vibes, German vibes, Dutch vibes. I am just giving off.
Heavy
Make
American.
America great again.
I think. I think you kind of a hulking figure. I would say, and I feel that is a kind of an American. And you also have that classic American huckster aura about you. Like, this guy's got 10 types of snake oil he's ready to sell you. And he's walking in like he frickin' owns the place. So I'd pin you as American a mile away.
Yeah. No, and people are like, well, why don't you just put on a Canadian like patch or something?
Yeah,
it doesn't work. I don't seem Canadian at all.
That originated in like the Bush years.
Yeah. Exactly.
Nobody believes that.
No. Work. Plus 51st state, so it's.
And as we merge into the meat of the episode, or before we merge into the meat of the episode, Ryan, I do also just want to put a shout out to folks. If you'd be willing to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us, would be super appreciative. Helps people find the podcast. Preferably 5 stars. You could tell us what you like. You could pitch your ideas for episodes in there, and it would just be a very nice feather in the cap for something that we do for free. Well, it's not free for us. We paid. We actually weirdly pay to do this.
Yeah, exactly. I have a theory that most podcasters pay to do it. I mean, I know it's not a theory.
I mean, we know that. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Now, are you ready to get into the meat?
No, it's Lent. Can we have meat?
No, well, you're right. This is coming out in Lent. We're actually recording this on Ash Wednesday. It's so fitting. Did you get your ashes, by the way?
No, and wildly, I didn't see a single person with
that
ashes.
Is odd, because Poland is such a Catholic country.
Yeah, I literally just spent the day walking around in like Pope John Paul's like footsteps around Krakow, and not an ash on my head did I see.
I wonder whether that, first of all, maybe in other countries they remove the ashes fairly quickly. Yeah. I do think it's a very like showy American version of Ash Wednesday, that we walk around with like the widest smear that we could get. Yeah. I remember on previous Ash Wednesdays, I would like really try to lean into the priest's thumb.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I sometimes feel like you did a little like makeup outline, like maybe a little eyeshadow.
Well, you want it to look like the cross. Yeah. ideally. And I'll tell you the wildest Ash Wednesday I had. The wildest Ash Wednesday,
Wildest, yeah.
which was I went and got ashes when I lived in London, and London is a very secular city, and not an ash to be seen, but I had a good Catholic church there that was ready to give them out, and I all I did was walk between the church back to work. It was like a 15-minute walk. It was like I was wearing a fluorescent sign on my head that said, Catholic dirty looks welcome. It was crazy. I mean, people clearly thought I had made some sort of mistake. And then I got back to work and very quickly removed him.
I do miss, as a kid, I went to Catholic school. And so in the mornings, on Ash Wednesday, we'd all go and it'd be like a whole thing. So together.
That's the best. Just built right into the curriculum.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like recess.
It felt like recess. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Ryan, if we're getting into the Catholic talk, that means that it's time for us to head to Vatican City. Let's take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right. I have to ask you straight off. Ryan, have you been to Rome? Have you been to the Vatican?
I have never been to the Vatican, and I've only been to the airport in Rome. I've barely been to Italy. I spent like 3 nights in Italy my whole life.
It's wild. I mean, I have not been to Italy extensively, really just Rome and the Vatican. So that's a big gap. Maybe if we ever get it together to take an international trip together, maybe we got to go hit the major cities of Italy.
That would be a little different from Knoxville, where we went last week.
We didn't even go to Knoxville. You mean Louisville?
Yeah.
Knoxville. My God, it's all bleeding together for this guy. Well, that makes it very exciting for me that you haven't been there, because it's a very, when you grow up as Catholic as we did, it is odd to finally set foot in the Vatican, because it looms large. You hear about it your whole life, the Pope, the archbishops, the cardinals. And then as you become older and you learn about kind of the real politic of the Catholic Church, you realize this is the power center for 1 billion people's beliefs around the world. And I went actually, and got a pretty special, like, behind the scenes look at the Vatican, because I went as part of a Harvard delegation that was going on something they called the Vatican Trek, which was basically Catholic organizations in the at Harvard setting up special tours behind the scenes. And we met with the Vatican Secretary of State, and some of the shortlist folks for the next Pope were the cardinals who we sat down and we learned about Catholic work all around the world, charitable work, but also diplomacy. And it was, at that time, kind of all the news, like the biggest victory at that time was the Vatican's role in opening up Cuba during the Obama administration. And, Francis we went and saw Francis give a papal address, and I'm going to talk about how you do time it and get tickets enough to see the Pope while you're there, whoever the Pope may be, because we don't know that it's going to be Francis. And either way, it's extremely timely this year, because this year, 2025, is a church jubilee year. Is that something you've read about or about, Rye?
I'm familiar with the Jubilee years. I remember them happening. Yeah.
And this is basically every 25 years, the church calls a Jubilee year, which is a year of faith, doubling down on beliefs, penance, forgiveness. We love incorporating as much sin as forgiveness, and that prompt. There's a bunch of special things happen which prompt a lot of people to want to go to the Vatican, and so. If you've got the Pope dying in a Jubilee year, boy, golly, that is going to be a hot ticket to some of these sites. So for anyone who doesn't know kind of the background, the Vatican is its own independent sovereign state. I believe it's the smallest country in the world. And it's completely within Italy. It's completely within Rome, but it is its own state, and the head of that state is the Pope. I mean, it's monarchical. Monarchical? That's a word, right? Monarchical?
monarch.
Yeah, it's a monarchy.
Yeah,
it's a monarchy with the Pope at the head. He's the head of state, and he's the head of the faith. And so it's pretty wild and it's pretty unique. And I remember my very first, your first impression, of course, is, oh my God, it's so old. There's so much history. It's so beautiful. But also when you grew up really Catholic and you're walking around, you're seeing all these church figures walking around in their normal daily lives. When you get behind the scenes and you see kind of the lives of cardinals, and, there's like orders of nuns whose like primary responsibility is to like cook and clean within the Vatican. A lot of the stuff seems weirdly out of time. And you do kind of walk away going, boy, this is a lot of old men in elaborate costumes doing a lot of really old rituals.
You know what other city you can do that in? Washington, D.C.
Oh, boy. That is really good. Good observation. And, but we're not getting political here today. So I just remember thinking when you grow up in the Vatican is kind of an ethereal idea that you're learning about in church. When you actually come face to face to it, you realize that the church is actually run by humans. Who are sort of claiming the mantle of God, and the human fallibility of the Catholic Church has been especially prevalent during our lifetimes.
Well, the church is fallible. It's just the Pope who is infallible.
Infallible, right? But yeah. that was, a Pope just kind of decided that one day.
Wow.
And we've had a series of popes who kind of roll their eyes at that, and we have one right now in Francis as well.
Yes.
Who am I to judge? Famously.
Yeah.
And so
you're the Pope. Literally.
So the Vatican was set aside as it's also called the Holy See. That's another thing everyone should know. The Holy See, SEE, and the Holy See, it was set aside in 1929 as this separate state by the Italian government. And so it's just, I'm always interested in seeing how it plays across that political and religious line. And in this Jubilee year of 2025, they expect 32 million visitors to Rome. And in fact, Rome has been doing a whole bunch of infrastructure projects to try to prepare themselves for this influx of people. And gosh, if there's a conclave on top of that to elect the next pope, I'm sure that number just surges.
Yeah, there's nothing more exciting than watching sort of the conclave happen from the outside.
Which is kind of interesting because there's really not that much to watch.
No. Well, you're waiting for the smoke.
Yeah. So just to give context of what the conclave is. The conclave is where all the cardinals from around the world come to Rome and are put behind lock and key. Conclave means with key, and that means they're locked away, and where they're locked away is the Sistine Chapel. And this is familiar to anyone who's seen the recent movie, which was 90% good and 10% trashy, and at least in my opinion. What did you think of it, Ryan?
I mean, I think the acting is outrageously good, and it looks beautiful, and I think the plotting's a little weird, but overall, I thought it's a really good movie. I
found the twist very
unnecessary.
It just seemed very shoehorned in when you already had a lot of high drama.
Totally. And I think that there could have, we don't want to give too much away, but I didn't love the twist. I didn't think it added much.
I have a pitch for an alternative ending that I think is much stronger, but we'll put that aside. So all the cardinals come and they vote, and there's elaborate rituals. They congregate in the Sistine Chapel, and we're going to talk today about the Sistine Chapel and how you can visit it as a tourist. They sit in the Sistine Chapel and they vote, and you have to get 2/3 of the vote in order to become pope. And the only way they communicate with the outside world is they send smoke up out of a chimney that you can look at that is above the Sistine Chapel complex there. And if it's black smoke, no pope. And if it's white smoke, that means they've chosen the pope. And then whoever that cardinal is that becomes the pope, though it could be any Catholic man, me, Ryan. So you got to get your pope name ready. That cardinal chooses a saint's name to be their pope name. And that's why Pope Francis chose Francis. And then there's 1,000 news articles about what the inspiration and symbolism and what it says about the direction of the church. And with Francis, all that news was that it was going to be an embrace of the impoverished, the disenfranchised, because that's what Saint Francis was famously about. Also,
Right.
I remember,
Well, can I ask you a
it
question?
was seen as like an olive branch to the Jesuits because of
Yes.
Francis Xavier.
Who would your saint name be? Sorry, your pope name be?
Yeah, I've thought about this long and hard. So I'm a great fan of a set of saints who are called cephalophores. Are you familiar with cephalophores? We've talked about it a long time ago.
I know the term, but I don't remember exactly.
So the cephalophores are a set of saints who they're martyred by beheading. And and the way that they are separated out, the reason they're called cephalophores is because their miracles often involve they pick up their severed head and then they either preach or they walk to a church and set their head down on an altar. So I'm tempted by maybe the most famous cephalophore, Saint Denis, who's the patron saint of Paris, and there's lots of I remember in Quebec there's a Saint Denis church with a nice Saint Denis statue. But I'd like to go further into the other cephalophores, see if maybe there's a more obscure one that I like. I feel like you would go with something very basic, some very well-known saint.
I think I might go with Sebastian.
Oh God! So you're gonna go with the gay saint?
Yeah, well, maybe. Have
you gotten that tattoo yet? Famously,
No,
you're preparing to get a Saint Sebastian tattoo.
That's when I return to Colombia in July.
I did give you some feedback on the initial sketch that I saw.
Well, there's a reason why you're not the one doing the tattoo, but
I still think you should listen to some of my. I think I had some good suggestions, and I sent you some inspiration.
Yeah, I don't think you're the target audience exactly, but yeah, I get it.
And where is it going to be on your body exactly?
On my, I'm very strong, so probably on my bicep area.
All right, that's fine. And for anyone who doesn't know, Saint Sebastian is usually depicted in art as being pierced with many different arrows, which I think Ryan takes as a certain symbolism that we don't need to get into here on this very Catholic episode.
No, not this one.
So one of the big things that is going to be an attraction at the Vatican during this Jubilee year, and then a pope can do this anytime they want outside of a Jubilee year, is what's called the opening of the holy doors. Ryan, are you familiar at all with these holy doors?
No, I don't think so.
So the holy doors, the most famous one is a set of doors at St. Peter's Basilica, and then there's several others that are open during the Jubilee year at major churches, basilicas around Rome. And the Pope opens the first one at St. Peter's, and it's the rare occasion where pilgrims, visitors are allowed to enter through the holy doors. And they're this very grand entrance, and the idea is that you're being transported into this more spiritual realm. And the Jubilee years are a year where confession is supposed to be a very big deal. So it's supposed to make you very prayerful and think you're supposed to be able to you can always get forgiven in confession, but entering through the holy door is considered like a special symbolic journey to purity. And Francis actually opened these doors in 2015 and 2016. And sometimes when the doors are closed, they actually get bricked up. So it's a really big deal to have them reopened, and they have beautiful art on them. And the Pope famously taps them with this little hammer, and then they open up in this big showy way, and that's very exciting. And then that happens at all these doors at the other basilica. And so this year you're able to go to St. Peter's, St. John Lateran, which is another major church in Rome, the Basilica of St. Mary Major, and the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls. And so these will be exciting things. And you know me, I'm a box checker. If I was there for the Jubilee, I'd be going door by door.
Door by door.
And
door by door.
Yeah, no, that's door to door. I know that song. That's Book of Mormon. We're talking Catholics here, man.
True.
And I just want to note that as with so many things associated with the Vatican and Catholicism, the history behind it goes back so far and is very well recorded. And this tradition of the Holy Doors actually goes back to 1525. So we've been doing it for a little while. I think we know how to open a door or two and brick them up and make it feel pretty special. I know that kind of showmanship about the church is something that you and I have always appreciated, and it's something that is certainly on display in every aspect of the Vatican.
Nobody does pomp like the Catholics.
No, and guilt. I would say nobody does pomp or guilt like the Catholics. And so we're going to start talking about St. Peter's Square and then move into the Basilica itself. St. Peter's Square is probably one of the most famous squares in the world, even though it is actually an oval. And it is basically the courtyard outside of St. Peter's Basilica. And St. Peter's is the most famous church in the Catholic tradition, and really in all of Christendom, and it is the number one site that you're going to want to see when you visit the Vatican. And easily accessible is St. Peter's Square. And this is where, when the conclaves are going on, when there's major masses on holidays, where the papal address is, this all takes place in St. Peter's Square. And it's most known, I would say, for the fact that it's surrounded by columns. There are 284 columns, all 56 feet high. So it's extremely grand. And dead in the center is an Egyptian obelisk, which I think is very representative of the fact that the world's wealth and so much of the world's power throughout its history has lived in this location. And so this ancient Egyptian obelisk was taken from Egypt, was planted here at this site. And what I find very interesting is it's also topped by a little cross, which, I mean, that really speaks to the history of sort of this conquering church, which is, they take this grand monument that pharaohs built and then plop a little cross on top, and then suddenly it becomes a Catholic monument. And still to this day, it now sits in this most important Catholic square outside the Basilica. So also surrounded beyond the pillars, there are statues of saints that are all around. One of the great things that we don't have time to talk about today, which would be kind of a fun bonus episode for us to do sometimes, is how you can identify different saints in the artistic tradition. There's like 25 saints who all have certain things that you can look for, and they relate to the stories behind the saints, what their specialties are, or what they're patron saints of, meaning they're specialties. Well, you're like a saint. Yeah. You're a saint of beekeepers. You're a saint of seafarers. And I would say the most important, it's like I said with Sebastian with the arrows, the most important one for the sake of today is going to be St. Peter. And Ryan, surely you know what St. Peter is usually pictured carrying.
St. Peter? He's carrying a sword. No.
Sometimes it's like you didn't go to Catholic school.
A staff?
He's carrying keys. He's got keys because Jesus famously gave him the keys to the kingdom of heaven.
Wow. I mean, I know St. Peter's an important guy, but I didn't know that he's got
the keys. So anywhere in Christian art, in Western Renaissance art, if you've got an angel with keys, that is that's St. Peter. And also,
he's got like a huge ring of keys, like he's like a delivery man. Or something
usually there's one big one.
There's one key.
Well,
I need 4 keys to get into my Airbnb. I think there's one key to the kingdom of heaven.
I don't think there's that many entrances to heaven. I think it's really the primary one.
I'm looking for the back one, let me tell you.
But the keys and the tradition of St. Peter, this is all very important to understand in terms of the Vatican, because St. Peter was Jesus's apostle who came to Rome during the Roman Empire to preach Christianity. And while the Romans were tolerant of other religions, Christians had a problem because you were expected to honor the emperor as a god, and Christians wouldn't do that. And Peter wouldn't do that, and Peter therefore was killed by Nero. And he was crucified. And Peter, also in art, you'll notice, was crucified upside down. And why was he crucified upside down? It was by his own request,
Right.
because he didn't feel he was worthy of being crucified in the way that Jesus was crucified. So there's all this symbolism all throughout. And anytime you see a keys upside down cross, that's Peter.
And the keys sort of hanging upside down.
The keys are not present when he's being crucified. Okay.
All right.
And the reason this is St. Peter's Basilica and St. Peter's Square is because the remains of Peter are believed to be at this site, because this is where Nero's circus was, which is where they would do the chariot races, where they would do gladiator fights, and where they would kill people who had done wrong by the emperor. And so this is believed to be where Peter was killed and buried. And there was an very early church here, Old St. Peter's, where there are certain little things that you can look for in the current architecture of the Grand Basilica that then was built on top of it. But there is a shrine to St. Peter that you can sort of look down upon when you visit the basilica itself. But that is the history of why St. Peter is a big deal. Jesus said that Peter was the rock upon which he would build the church. So he's known as kind of the cornerstone of the church. He's considered the first pope, and every pope from St. Peter has taken that power from Peter. And of course, there's been lots of fights over that over the years, but that's why Peter is such a big deal in the Catholic tradition.
No, that's very cool.
And the other thing that you're going to do in St. Peter's Square, Ryan, that you can see is the Swiss Guard. You've surely seen the costumes of the Swiss Guard.
Most definitely. I love the Swiss Guard.
And so these are actually these are like the protectors of Vatican City. They're donated by Switzerland to be the guards of the Pope. And there's a rumor that Michelangelo designed their very flamboyant uniforms, and they do carry these sort of staff pikes. They're not very intimidating looking. What training do they actually go through? I couldn't really say, but I know on my visit to the Vatican, I was in very close proximity to a lot of the Swiss Guard, because we were being brought back into these special areas and churches and living quarters where the cardinals and the Pope reside. And so all of that is protected by the Swiss Guards.
Very cool. The Swiss Guards do have really fun uniforms. I hope they were designed by Michelangelo.
The other thing that I'll note that's pretty interesting is when there are major events, one thing that benefits the crowds is that the oval of St. Peter's Square is actually kind of like a shallow bowl. So even if you're way on the outside, you can actually look over the heads of people who are below you further down in the bowl. So it's actually very much built to welcome a crowd.
And the crowd it will have.
And a crowd it will have, particularly on Wednesdays. And that's because Wednesdays are the days that if you're looking to see the Pope, and this only happens when the Pope is in residence at the Vatican, but if you're looking to see the Pope, on Wednesdays, typically at 10:30 a.m., there is what's called the Papal Audience. And the Papal Audience this is where, you get kind of viral moments every year where the Pope is like going around shaking hands and somebody gives him something, or he like trades hats with somebody, or, the kind of like showbiz part of being Pope. And this comes from the Papal Audience. This is where the Pope gets up. He doesn't do a full mass, usually gives a sermon, a very, short, usually it's 10 or 15 minutes, especially under Francis, who likes to keep things short and tight. And then they bring the Pope around this perimeter where you're allowed to stand and try to touch hands or have some interaction with the Pope. And so you do have to get tickets to this event. So if you're going, I would say that you definitely should reserve this beforehand. It is usually technically scheduled to start at 9, but doesn't start until that like 10:30 time period. And really, to get at the front of the line, you're going to want to be there at like 7. So it's like a half day affair if you want to go see the Pope in person. And also be sure that the Pope is going to be there. And of course, if something like this happens, like this medical crisis that's going on, you're not going to get your papal audience there. But it is very cool and it's very special.
Understudy? Like, is there like
do they? No, I don't believe that they actually do anything when the Pope isn't in residence or isn't well. And I will link to how you actually book tickets. Believe it or not, it is by phone or by fax. So you're going to have to. I noticed my public library here in Somerville has a public fax machine.
Yeah,
so
it's funny because that's exactly how you had to book tickets to the Sermon on the Mount. So really unchanged for over 2,000 years.
Very funny. It's very funny. So that's where you see the papal audience. You also occasionally will get the Pope appearing at a window high up in St. Peter's Square. That's often on Sundays. You can check the Vatican websites to see what the schedule for those appearances are, and those things always can go awry. I was just thinking it would really be a bummer.
His window peering.
Of course. You gotta.
He ever kind of peers out just to see what's going on?
Yeah. Sure, of course. I mean, there's a lot of windows in the Vatican. Yeah, you're going to look out occasionally.
Yeah.
And Francis has been very popular for attracting people. So I think this is going to be, certainly there's a lot of Pope-seeking behavior, but I'll say your chances of seeing the Pope without going to one of these regular scheduled appearances is very nil. So if it's important to you, you should definitely take the care to book the tickets and find the times.
So if you're at some random spaghetti place, you don't think he's going to walk in and just order a bowl?
Some random spaghetti place, says
place?
the world traveler, Ryan.
He's a man of the people. He's a man of the people. There's a lot of Italian food in Argentina. I'm sure he gets homesick.
So then after you've taken in sort of the majesty of the front square, you want to go into St. Peter's itself. And the Basilica itself is this extremely grand church. I mean, it's one of those pieces that's like, it's beyond being able to really make sense of it. It's so large. And it has several famous pieces of art and several important traditions of the Catholic Church preserved in it that for non-Catholics, I think would seem very foreign. So I want to call those out. But, it's basically a riot of altars, monuments, tombs. And interestingly, Michelangelo was part of the construction of the current iteration of this church. So there was an original church that was lost, and then that was basically dismantled, and this basilica was built in its place. And Michelangelo's vision for it was for it to be more like a Greek Orthodox church, which is an even cross. Okay, so there's like sort of the altar in the center, and then 4 aisles coming off in the shape of a cross. But the more traditional Catholic architecture is for a long nave. So the main aisle being much longer and a kind of a grand entrance. And ultimately, that was added to this basilica, and it created a whole bunch more real estate for chapels and plaques and statues. And so that's why you almost get this like museum quality to it. But it's important to acknowledge it's an active religious space. So almost at any time, there are masses or services being said in the side chapels or in the main chapel itself. And just like any church, it has a daily mass that takes place right there in St. Peter's Basilica.
That's fantastic. So you can always get a chance to grab a mass. That's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I don't think I'd say grab a mass as flippantly as you just did, but yeah, you can take a mass, and I actually attended a mass in one of the side chapels that I'm going to talk about, and it was very special. And I mean, it is easy to, especially if you grew up like in the Christian tradition, there is a timeless quality to these spaces that is it is a spiritual awakening if you don't go into it too cynically. So I'm going to encourage you to kind of let the history and artistic value of the place wash over you as you go into the basilica. And one of the great accomplishments of it that you're going to want to take in is the main dome of St. Peter's. This was designed by Michelangelo, and it was completed in 1590. And it is incredibly ornate. It is a absolutely enormous and has great beautiful paintings in it, frescoes by many different artists, including Michelangelo and Botticelli. So you know, if you really want to dig into each panel of the art, you're going to have to pick up a like walk-through tour guide, simply because we don't have the time to do like a proper walking tour version of St. Peter's Basilica. But the pure size of this dome, the fact that it was built in 1590 is just mind-boggling. And another piece, so if you're looking up, I would also encourage you to look down, because there are also markers inside. And I feel like this is like a real like Catholic kind of big C energy, big church energy. There are markers that show you like where other churches are smaller. So it'll be like, oh, St. Paul's would end here.
Right.
I just think that's like so funny.
That reminds me of somebody else who might do that. Yeah, I like it.
It's very funny. Are you referencing the president?
No, I would never do that.
Oh, okay, right, because we don't get into politics here on the show ever since we lost. One of the great pieces of art that you're going to take in there, and it's one of the most famous pieces of art and sculpture in the Western world, is the Pieta. And the Pieta is Michelangelo's marble statue of Mary holding the body of Jesus after he's been crucified, and it is it's extremely emotional. It was done between 1499 and 1500, and there's a lot. It's a single block of marble. I don't know if you know this, Ryan, but it was actually heavily damaged by somebody who went in with a hammer to St. Peter's and started knocking away with it. So God. It does have like a barrier around it, but that doesn't really take away from its artistic value.
It should have a barrier around it.
I agree with that.
I mean, Michelangelo, had quite a career, and that, I've never seen obviously the real one, but I've seen probably a million replicas, and it is astonishing. And he's basically creating like an image that will be ripped off by so many painters, for thousands of years.
I'll tell you, one of the things that is very interesting to me is that my mom, who's never gone abroad, she remembers going to the New York World's Fair and seeing the Pieta in person, because it was on loan from the Vatican to the World's Fair. Isn't that incredible?
That's amazing.
It's a very affecting piece of work. I will say that, like, the emotion of it, the weight of Jesus's body, it's a, if there's anything the Catholics love, it's sort of like a visceral feeling about death and sin, and I think the Pieta sort of brings that to life with there's like a hanging arm of Jesus that shows that he's clearly dead, the weight weighing on his mother, but there's also some kind of weird stuff, like the fact that Jesus is 33 but his mom looks like she's like 20, where the
Holy Spirit is better than collagen,
well, I mean, it's kind of like collagen and Ozempic all together. I mean, it's very powerful.
Do you know how old Michelangelo was when he carved this?
Tell me.
24.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's why he goes on and builds the church, and he's in his like 60s. And he did certain parts of the Sistine Chapel that we're going to talk about when he was in his 60s. And by Renaissance standards, being in your 60s, I mean, you were incredibly elderly, and here he is on this crazy high scaffolding.
Think about how much his neck must have hurt, like I know,
like,
if I sit at a computer for 6 hours, I'm basically paralyzed for 24 hours. And he's 60 and he's painting upside down, it's crazy.
It's very funny. So you'll get to see the world famous Pieta, and also this is going to creep out some of the. I mean, it even creeps out some of the Catholics, but one of the things that Catholics really like is preserving dead bodies, and quite a number of the popes are buried within St. Peter's Basilica. There's 91, I believe, down in the grottos area, way down below, the necropolis below, which that you can actually
a horror movie waiting to happen.
Yeah, boy,
the
oh
Pope's
my God,
rise.
Ryan, that is a fantastic idea for a movie, especially on the back of Conclave. That's a great idea. My God. And Peter could be the most like grizzly with the key.
Yeah.
He could stab you with a key. This is good.
I love it.
Okay, that's nobody take that idea. That's a really good idea. And this includes popes. I mean, this isn't like some medieval sort of tradition. We continue to do this to today, and the chapel that I mentioned that I had a mass in was actually where Pope John the 23rd is preserved, and he's famously known as like the good pope, the jolly pope. He was kind of a tubby, friendly, grandfatherly sort of figure, and he's responsible for Vatican II. So he's the reason that the church, as much as it did, moved into the modern world, started giving the mass in secular languages outside of just Latin Mass, and making the church more accessible generally. And he is behind glass, preserved. There's different popes are covered in wax. Others are said to have that their skin is preserved miraculously, that they don't decay because they have favor with God. But you're looking at a dead body that sits directly below the altar of the chapel.
See it.
Oh, you can see it. You can see
So it's like
him.
Lenin. It's like Lenin's tomb. It's
exactly
like,
right.
Yeah.
Yes. And he's preserved. And, you're sitting there looking at it the whole mass. So death is right in your face as a Catholic. And it's a little creepy. I'll have to say the costume that they have him in is a little Santa Clausy. It's like red with white trim.
Do they think they change it like with the seasons? Like
no, they don't. I can say for sure they do not. It's not a dress up corpse. And do you know there's even a corpse like this is preserved in a church in New York City that I visited. There's a saint that's below an altar in New York, preserved body. You go to mass, you stare at the body of the saint the entire time. I'll look that up for recalculating. And these glass coffins are around. There's a couple popes that you could spy, but I would recommend Pope John the 23rd particularly. One, because I liked his message of trying to modernize the church. There's actually a great book that just came out that I'm really looking forward to reading. That's about the last 7 popes, and Pope John the 23rd is seen as this like pivotal pope who tried to move the church into the modern world, only succeeded in certain ways. But he was ready to say birth control was okay, and he was really making fairly radical moves. And then in the way the church does, it sort of swung back the other way. At the very center of the church, which is where the dome is located, where down below Peter's remains are believed to be, that's where the papal altar is. And this is the great grand altar that when the Pope says mass in the church, this is where it's done. And it's got these really impressive, it's got a really impressive sort of canopy above it. It's got these very interesting sort of spiral columns. One thing that I think it very successfully does, and Rick Steves talks about this in his guidebook to St. Peter's, is it helps break up the space into smaller spaces. Like all these side chapels and all these different levels that you have, like a church within a church. This papal altar has that because it has this canopy, so it feels a little more intimate than this enormous space that the church itself is.
And I do love cathedrals that have those little break-off rooms. I think those are lovely.
Break-off rooms. Oh, well, let's head to a breakout room. We'll do some brainstorming. And on that altar is St. Peter's chair. St. Peter's chair is it dates back to the 1st century. It's got its legs are statues of popes, with the idea that the popes support the church, and the church is the seat above it. It's just simply because of how old it is. It's considered kind of the founding chair, the throne of St. Peter, as it's called. And then while there's many other smaller sites and chapels to visit, the other major thing that you're going to want to see on any trip is the bronze statue of St. Peter. And this is a 5th century bronze statue. I like it because it's kind of a bearded Peter seated, and he's got a little helicopter halo attached to the back of his head. And it has, in all that time, been rubbed for blessing, for good luck, by pilgrims comes visiting Rome, and as a result, its feet are completely worn down. And you still today can go and rub or kiss these areas, and that's just the tradition of the church. And I really remember seeing this statue and just thinking, my God, how many tens of thousands of human hands have touched this thing? And you're taking part in this sort of grand tradition of it. And if you happen to be there on June 29th, that is the Feast of St. Peter, where they actually do what you were suggesting, Ryan, and they dress him up. They dress the statue up. They give him the papal tiara, which is this kind of crown.
A tiara? It's like a drag pope?
So have you never seen the papal crown, Ryan?
I must.
Popes have not worn this crown in a long, long time, but it's almost more like a tall
Benedict
turban.
probably roll it. He probably wore it all day.
This is a major plot point in the young Pope. He brings the crown back, which I love.
Second season.
It's very grand. It's very impressive. And
it's a beautiful crown.
It's a good crown. So I'm going to put Pope John the 23rd's corpse and the papal tiara up on the Insta at some point.
It's a triple. It's
big.
Tall,
it's as I say, it's more of like a turban. It's like a crown on a crown on a crown.
Yeah.
So so you're going to want to go and just get your rub in on St. Peter. And if you're there to see him in all his feast finery, all the better. Now, the other two places that I want to cover are the Vatican Museums and the Sistine Chapel. And because I know our folks don't like endless episodes, I'm going to go fairly fast through the Vatican Museums, even though, like any great collection of art, like the Met Museum, like MoMA, like the British Museum, there's so much to see. You could spend endless amounts of time at the Vatican Museums. And the truth is, the Vatican also has a ton of treasures that are not open to the public. You got the Vatican archives, where things have been plundered from around the world for centuries, and it's kind of closed off. But as you would imagine, there's a great historic collection of art that includes Egyptian art, Sumerian art, Greek and Roman art. And there's just a couple of, highlights that I would call out, because I believe the main reason people go to the Vatican Museum is because of where the tour ends at the museum, which is you end in the Sistine Chapel, which is really, the grand poobah of all tourist sites into the Vatican. And we all know it from popular culture, but you actually get to see it with your own eyes, and it's pretty incredible. And so the Vatican Museum complex directly goes into this side door into the Sistine Chapel, and that's where they move you through. First thing I want to mention is book a ticket. Book a ticket. If you haven't booked a ticket, book a tour, because you don't want to waste an enormous amount of time waiting in line to try to get one of the day of tickets that are very hard to come by. And so planning, especially in like a Jubilee year like this, is incredibly important for visiting. And I do think one of the hacks is, if you don't have something booked way in advance, look for a tour and get a specialty tour just to get you in the door faster. So I'm going to just call out a couple of the great things to see. But, if you've got patience and you're willing to put up with enormous crowds, you should take the time to linger and seek out all the different treasures that are around the Vatican Museums. One of the most famous sculptures that is there, which you see fairly early in your visit, is called Laocoon and His Sons. And Laocoon is Laocoon and has the umlauts above the second O. So if a lot of people will call it Laocoon, but the art historians and the classicists call it Laocoon. And this is a sculpture that if you saw it, you would recognize it. It's this father with his two sons surrounded by sea serpents, and they're struggling and their muscles are bulging. It is done by Michelangelo. It's several pieces of marble that you would think it was a single piece because it was brought together. And Laocoon was the the Trojan priest who in mythology famously warned against taking gifts from Greeks, which means don't let that giant wooden horse into Troy. So he knew what was going on, and he and his sons were actually tortured by the gods by these serpents, and this is the depiction of that, and it's very emotional. It's obviously sort of an apotheosis of Michelangelo, showing how well he can show sculpted muscles and strain, and
boy can he, boy
can he. Yeah, we're gonna get into that into the Sistine Chapel where there's a lot of naked male bodies. You go through several grand galleries. There's a gallery called the Gallery of the Candelabra. There's a map gallery. The marble candelabras have a lot of Roman sculpture and mosaics in it. Again, priceless works of art here that we just don't have the time to go quickly through each one of them. But also just taking in the ambience and walking through is really how you're likely to see it, because these places get so crowded. But another place that you're going to want to actually like plant and look at are in a section called the Raphael rooms, where Raphael's famous "The School of Athens" is a grand painting that's there, and the idea is that it's this school of all the great thinkers through time. And so you have Plato and Aristotle, these ancient philosophers, along with some of the great minds of the Renaissance. And so it's trying to bring together this like older intellectual tradition and then the tradition of what was the contemporary time then. And it's really interesting. There's lots of great details in it. And it's fun to be able to kind of where's Waldo, the intellectual greats. Apparently one of the little Easter eggs is that Plato was modeled after Leonardo da Vinci. So again, we're trying to bring together all different types of great minds in this school of Athens. And gosh, Ryan, aren't you just shocked to learn that they were all men?
Not particularly, no. They were all turtles.
What's that mean?
Michelangelo, Leonardo.
Oh my God.
Folks,
all right,
we have a lot of 70s, 80s babies listening in. They got it.
Just two more I'm going to shout out. One is like probably the most neglected part of the museum, which is there's a collection of modern religious art as part of this museum. You'd think maybe they stopped collecting in the Renaissance based on what's most popular, but actually Pope Paul VI in 1973 started collecting modern art. And it's pretty neat. I think it's just cool to see the full trajectory from ancient to modern. So I think it's worth a visit.
Modern, like Andy Warhol.
No, it's modern religious art. So
gotcha.
But it does look much more of our day and time. I mean, you can see artists. There's not many artists today who are producing Michelangelo like sculptures.
No, there are not.
And then the final the final great work of art that I'd call out is Caravaggio's The Entombment of Christ. Ryan, I'm guessing from the name you can probably guess what that shows.
It's him being entombed.
You got it. And where is he entombed? Do you recall?
He's entombed in a cave.
It's very good. Very good.
Yeah.
And for
a second, I thought it was like a trick question.
No. The thing about Caravaggio's display here is it's renowned for its use of light and dark, but especially the sort of raw emotion of this moment. I mean, I think in a way it's like it relates to the Pieta in that way for me, where there's a lot of emotion in that sculpture. Here, there's a lot of intensity in how it's displayed, and it goes to less of like an idealized version of humanity that you get in the Roman depiction of art, and here you kind of see something that's much more real, much more recognizable as human.
Very good, Caravaggio.
And then the final place that we're going to talk about in terms of the Vatican tour is where the Vatican Museums lets out, which is into the Sistine Chapel. And the Sistine Chapel if I took you back out to St. Peter's Square, actually, you know what? Let's just start again from the beginning. So St. Peter's Square is this giant oval courtyard. I'm just kidding. So if you're looking at St. Peter's Basilica as you approach, to the right is where the Sistine Chapel is. And from the outside, you wouldn't know that this is, you know, one of the most famous churches in the world. But when you get into the Sistine Chapel itself, I would say that you have two major impressions. The first is it's small. It is not a large church, especially if you've just come from St. Peter's Basilica. It is like a little jewel box. And the second, and the reason I compare it to a jewel box is because the colors are incredibly intense. So Michelangelo famously created artwork that completely surrounds you in the Sistine Chapel. It's on the roof, it's on the walls, and it's most famously, probably the stuff that people picture most vividly are the walls behind the altar. What's kind of weird is that you enter from the side, which is where actually like only clergy would have had access to. So you're not walking sort of up the grand nave and taking in that giant Last Judgment scene behind the altar. Instead, you're entering from the side, and it is so insanely crowded. It can be very hard. You're not allowed to sit down, and I will say you do feel a lot of pressure to move through fast, especially because the crowd is kind of funneled by this altar screen, this choir screen that divides the space. This is where lay people used to be kept to one side and clergy on the other side. This is like pre-John the 23rd kind of stuff, where the clergy was just kind of way off in the distance saying a mass in Latin that nobody understood, and the unwashed would sit behind a screen way back and somehow be made morally better. It is so packed with imagery and so complex, it can be really, really overwhelming. So I would say my like number one recommendation to you is before you enter the Sistine Chapel, research what the stories are, what the paintings are, and what's most important for you to see, because there are so many details and there's going to be so many people that you cannot stand there with a guidebook in the crush of it and just start reading about what's above you. So I'm going to give you a cursory look at the general themes that you see depicted here. I would highly recommend, and I will link in the show notes, there's a BBC podcast called In Our Time, by a host called Melvin Bragg. It is dry, intellectual, academic stuff, but he has a brilliant episode on the Sistine Chapel with some art historians, and they really dive deep into what inspired this imagery and how Michelangelo brought this to life. And so I recommend that you listen to that before you go in and visit.
Good recommendation.
Thank you. So let's start on the roof. So the roof is going to tell the sort of creation through to Jesus story. Okay. Because the whole church is meant to take you from like the moment of creation through to the final judgment. And the ceiling is where a lot of those major initial stories get told. So the separation of light and dark by God is depicted there. The most famous, probably the most famous image in the church is the creation of man, which is God extending out his finger and almost touching, or perhaps having just touched the finger of Adam. And one detail that I was not aware of when I visited, and I neglected not seeing this, was that apparently there are sort of figural forms that are meant to evoke like souls that God is drawing from to put into human bodies in the form of God. So I feel like we all kind of picture the head and the arms and not the bodies outstretched beyond. And so that's just an interesting detail to look for.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Truly horrifying.
There's a depiction of Jonah and the whale, though the whale in this form is actually just a big fish. There's the full story of Noah which includes the kind of precursor to the Ark time, where he's just a drunken slob.
Some bad things that happen there.
Often forgotten, and then the Ark, and it leads through a number of prophets, and that's sort of the I consider that kind of the Old Testament version up on the roof. And then, throughout the sides, there's lots of different saints and martyrs depicted. I think it would be interesting to do a follow-up episode that's just on the symbolism of the Sistine Chapel, maybe as part of that kind of like Catholic art symbolism to look for. But the main event, I would say, is the Last Judgment, which is up on the back. It has so many details and was so kind of scandalous in its time, because one of the things you're going to be struck by most is just how many different figures there are there, how bright the colors are. By the way, these colors have been restored. There were years of soot and smoke up against them, and actually they were quite dull for a time. And then those layers of film were taken off, and people were famously struck by how bright the actual colors that Michelangelo used on there, and a lot of depiction of nudes, most male nudes. And these are supposed to be sort of the blessed and the damned. People at the Last Judgment, famously, in the Bible, the Last Judgment is when Jesus descends as a judge, and he's here depicted as a judge with Mary sort of clinging to him, and sending the good up to heaven and the bad damning them down to hell. And it is, again, that sort of pure, raw emotion comes across. Those that are going up to heaven look very, very happy to be going to heaven, and those that are going to hell, and who actually are shown with the sort of ferrymen of the river Styx. Like, there is this mythological element brought into even this highly Christian depiction. They look like they have given up all hope, and it almost reaches cartoony levels, and there's so much debate, and interesting debate, and you should come to your own conclusions of what was Michelangelo really trying to accomplish here. Was he trying to be scandalous by depicting the nudes? Was he trying to heighten emotions so that you knew what you were meant to feel, or you kind of knew what the stakes were of your own moral choices, that you could be up above or you could be down below, and it's going to be really great or it's going to be really horrible? It shocked people when this was originally revealed. The nudity shocked people, and it is only by the grace of God that this painting was not destroyed. Apparently, El Greco reached out to the Pope and said, let me tell you, don't put up with all this trouble. I'm just going to paint right over it, give you something real nice, something that everybody can really agree on. And people really rose up when there were all these plans to cover them up. And there was a compromise where, for a time, there were actual garments put over some of the most naked figures. The one detail that I'm going to call out among the many different people in various forms of ecstasy or dread is there is a depiction of St. Bartholomew. And St. Bartholomew lost his life when he was flayed, which means that his skin was removed from his body. And he is shown holding drooping skin, which is his own skin, that has been removed from his body. And Michelangelo actually put a self-portrait in that skin. So I just think that's such a clever way to get your own likeness into this painting. And also a very humble way, right? Like, I didn't make myself one of the saints. I made his flayed skin into my likeness.
God.
And then there's one other figure that just stands out in my mind, and I'll pop this one on the Instagram too, which is a person who seems to be coming to the realization for the first time that, you know what, it's not going to work out, and eternity in hell awaits him. And it is this face of just completely giving up hope. I mean, I feel like it's kind of like how you and I feel on like Monday mornings at 8 a.m. So it's really spectacular. I would recommend, even though it's going to be busy at all times, I think that you would do well to take your chances at going later in the day, because a lot of these places get overwhelmed, especially early in the morning, because people are fighting to get in, and they think that if they wait too late, they won't get to see everything. So maybe you could even book tickets for 2 different days, take in the Vatican, rush through the Sistine Chapel, and then wait till later in the day to go back to see the Sistine Chapel itself. No matter what happens, you're going to feel like you didn't have enough time to see it, which is depressing. But make the most of it while you can, and don't feel the need to rush yourself despite the crowd. Go in well educated about what you want to see. There's plenty of books and online resources. I'll link to a few of them that walk through all the different imagery there. And you've listened to this podcast, and you're going to listen to In Our Time, and so you will be well schooled. And while there are many other churches and wonderful things to see within Rome and the Vatican, this is a good place to stop for those big 3 sites: St. Peter's Basilica and the courtyard outside, the Vatican Museums, and the Sistine Chapel. I hope, Ryan, I've inspired you to get on a plane to Italy.
Well, peace be with you, Kiernan.
And also with you. I get nowadays they say, and with your spirit. What kind of hippie shit is that?
I don't like that.
And also with you, my friend. And with that, I think it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. It's why it's called the last stop. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment, and it's popularly known as the people segment. And that's because it's the time that we come together to share. We share stories, dreams, could be a review of gear. It could be a piece of content that we've seen, but it must importantly check one box. It has to inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you, as I ask you every episode, do you have a last stop this week?
I do have a last stop, Kiernan. I want to give a shout out to an app called Omio, Omio, and it has been the app that I've used to basically buy all of my train tickets as I've been gallivanting around Europe, and it covers most of the European companies that operate these trains and lets you pick your seat and then keeps your ticket on the app. And I just can't say enough good things about it. It's a lovely app, very easy to use, and has come in super handy while I've been traveling. So we'll link to it in the show notes.
Okay, I was unfamiliar with this, and so is it easily navigable in English?
Absolutely, yeah. It's like Google Flights for European trains.
Man, that's excellent. I can't believe the name kind of rings a bell. I do feel like, was there a predecessor to the app that bore this name? I think, and it's
also a website, but the app, I just find the app to be great, and because it saves your tickets as PDFs on the app, you don't have to
helpful.
Look for any emails or anything.
Yeah, that's great.
I know that you did a lot of research for this episode. Did you have time to bring a last stop, Kiernan?
Of course, Ryan, I did. I always did. Now, this one I'm a tiny bit late to, but I'm newly obsessed with it. Okay, there is a young YouTuber, a woman named Jenny Nicholson. And Jenny Nicholson is kind of a nerd influencer. She's very into Star Wars. Theme parks is her sort of specialty, which made me realize, Ryan, that we do not do much theme park content. And I wonder whether we should re-examine that.
You've been talking about a Disney episode for 7 years.
I mean, Disney's pretty much the only one that I've been to. I've been, there's like a terrible Six Flags experience 20 years ago, but that's about it.
Only terrible Six Flags experiences to talk about.
Anyway, Disney has been becoming less accessible to families, and Jenny Nicholson recorded, and this is going to sound really not like something you're going to want to engage with, a 4-hour review of that Star Wars immersive experience that Disney created and shut down 18 months later. And it was $6,000 a night. It was called the Galactic Star Cruiser, and it was basically a hotel that you lock yourself into. There's no windows. There's just screens that make it look like you're in space. And she meticulously recorded every detail of this thing. I mean, it is like such a historical document of this misstep by the Disney Corporation. And what I find, it's an incredibly compelling watch. It's both because she's entertaining. It's also because of the level of detail in it. And it wraps up. If you're only, obviously 4 hours is a lot. I listen to it as a podcast basically, but and that works fine. If you're only going to listen to it, listen to if you're only going to listen to part of it, listen to the last 45 minutes, which is basically an indictment about how companies are trying to do the least and charge the most at all times, and why that is a misguided principle of how to serve customers. And I think like it especially applies for a travel experiences, and especially in this like theme park world, where she makes a very compelling case that there was a lot of good ideas that were supposed to be incorporated here. And, meeting by meeting, bean counter by bean counter, everything got chipped away at until there was this shell of a horrible attraction that people were paying massive amounts of money.
Right. And you think for the amount of money that would cost, it would have to just be incredibly awesome. Right?
Also, I think like, for a family of 4, you could take a trip to Europe for that. From anywhere in the United States. And instead you got a 2-night disappointment. And the stories are incredible, way over the top. I promise you, I was very skeptical I could get through 4 hours of this thing. Within 20 minutes, I was hooked because it is just such a massive disaster. It's very funny. It made me appreciate, I know you're in the influencer business, Ryan.
In the business.
Sometimes I undervalue how good the quality of work of some of these, amateur entertainers can be. She is a true expert, and that comes across. And it must have taken her, I would guess, 120 hours to put together this brilliant documentary about this disaster. Nobody will do it better.
Well, it has garnered her quite a bit of fame. This huge write-up in the Times when it happened, and millions and millions of views. So definitely, if you can't watch all of it, check it out. It's definitely worth a watch.
All right, Ryan. And I will drop that in the show notes, of course. So what are we talking about next time?
We are like Jesse Eisenberg and Kiernan Calkin. We are going to head out to Krakow and talk about Krakow, Poland, which we have now both been to, and we'll have lots of things to say.
Fantastic. There'll be some more Catholic stuff. I feel like this is a good tee up for the Catholic side of it. John Paul II, famously the first Polish Pope. And he is as tied to Krakow as any other city in the world.
We'll have a lot to say on that. Until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this has been Out of Office, your occasional Catholic travel podcast.
This seat taken, my brother in Christ? I'm feeling I got to get to church.
Got to get to church. You got to get to the editing room.